Shabbat Shalom. One of my, if not my very favorite Calvin and Hobbes cartoon involves Calvin explaining the Big Bang and what the origins of the universe are, and finds out what it's called, the Big Bang. And he said, that's the problem with science is you have a bunch of empiricists trying to describe something of untold wonder. And I, empiricist that I am going to try today to describe something of undescribable wonder. So bear with me, and it might get a little weird, but we're going to try. We're going to do our best. Because this week, amidst all of the details of cubits of red silk and green silk and sockets of copper and bronze and silver, etc., is possibly in one of the most important things in the Torah, certainly when it comes to physical ritual items, it's the top. And that is the Ark of the Covenant that we get described in our chapters this morning that we read, right? This is the Ark that has on top of it, for 100 million bonus points, who is reading along? Yeah, is not the right answer. Sorry, guys. No, you're doing well, right? It's got golden. By the way, actually, in some ways, is the right answer because no one knows what the kruvim are, right? It has these kruvim, which in English become cherubim, right? But they're on top of the ark. We don't know what they are. They seem to be facing each other, right? We're told that when Israel is listening to God and doing what God wants, then the kruvim are facing one another. And when Israel is not, then they are turned away from one another. And these kruvim, these statues of whatever that is, they go on top of the Ark of the Covenant with the commandments inside, right? The poles that we read about, they get carried everywhere the Israelites go. But who gets to see them? No one, right? They're hidden. They're the high priest, right? Maybe on Yom Kippur, and they go into the Holy of Holies. But this is mysticism, right? This is the Israelite religion as a mystical cult, which we'll talk about what that is, right? This is the creation of what our sort of foundational spirituality, mysticism is. And when we get a hold of it, right? The Torah tells us about it, but doesn't really say much else about what they do, why they're there, when they're used, right? The face melting is Hollywood. That comes later. Thank you to the 10 people who chuckled at my Indiana Jones reference. I appreciate it. Right? What we get is the carrying of this ark, and we don't really know what else to be done with it. So when the rabbis get a hold of it, they do their very best to suck all the wonder right out of it. Right? And the rabbis as they are wont to do sometimes. And so the rabbis in the Talmud and the later rabbis in their commentaries, they try to explain what these statues are. Right? So the kruvim, so Rashi brings a midrash that says that it's Rivaya, and a rubaya in ancient Babylonian Aramaic means a child, and so therefore they're statues that look like children, right? By the way, artists, Renaissance, right? That's the cherubic angels that we're thinking of, right? That's because Rashi says that the ancient Torah is making a biblical, a Babylonian pun that won't be written for another 1,000 years, but okay, right? That's what this really means with these kruvim. Maybe that's what's happening, right? Later, Chizkuni and Rashbam, by the way, Rashbam commentaries class this Thursday, you should join us, right? Rashbam quotes Ezekiel to say that actually they were birds, and they were birds on top of that were facing each other. That's why they have wings, not because they're little babies with wings, but because they're birds. And This, in addition to being weird and artsy, is important because Chizkuni reminds us that later the Torah says you can't have any graven images of a living thing. So if they're birds, or really if they're anything, it is a sign that it must be hidden and never seen and not used for religious purposes, because otherwise it'd be violating the Torah. If you look at ancient archaeology of the area and the time period, right? If you talk to an archaeologist about what the Kruvim were, and I don't have a good quote for you on this, I learned it from Stephen Geller, my teacher at JTS. They were like oxen with wings. That's what the Kruvim were, that were facing each other or facing apart from each other. Why does any of this matter? Is a good question. When the rabbis want to imagine what the Kruvim were, they're trying to bring this into the world of the physical and the rational. But you can't really do that because A, we don't know. No one knows until we find it locked in that, cupboard somewhere in the warehouse. We don't know what it really looked like, and it doesn't really in some ways matter. And actually, the rabbis sort of understood that as well. In another part of the Talmud, they're talking about the way that the Torah describes the Kruvim isn't physically possible for them to exist. I'll take their word for it. But the way that it describes how big they are and where they are and what the wings look like, and if they're made of metal, they wouldn't actually be able to stand. And so the Talmud calls it B'nes Henomdin. Right? They are standing, they only exist by way of a miracle. And later rabbis picking up this idea say that the whole point of this Ark of the Covenant is to remind us that miracles exist and that miracles can happen. Because after the Exodus and after the frogs and the plagues and the everything, right, we don't see so many miracles. There's some, but not as many. But if you read it according to the rabbis here, every single day, the Israelites would walk out of their tents and they would look over to the center of the camp and they would see the Mishkan and they would think there are magical statues hidden inside those tents that only exist in a constant miracle all the time. And that idea, I think, is incredibly important for all of us. Because we, like the rabbis, we want to find explanations for basically everything in our world, right? We are moderns, we are rationalists, dare I say sometimes cynics. And so we want everything to make sense, and we want explanations, and I'm sure you all do this as well. And every time we come to Seder, sometimes someone is like, well, did you know actually in the Red Sea there's a thing with the low tide, and if the wind blows, and then it would seem like, yeah, you're nodding, you've heard this one before, right? We try to explain the miracles away, and that's fine, and that's lovely, and science is real, and that's good. And we need to believe in miracles. And we need to believe that there is some sort of connection. Because that's actually what then the later rabbis, the Hasidic thinkers, take from this. Sorry, Jess. The Hasidic rabbis, they turn and they say, the point of the Kruvim was a reminder that we're always going to be connected to God. Because what happens from those Kruvim, what happens from the Ark? God speaks to us. That's the place. We read it today. That's where God speaks to us from. Now, in our world right now, there are a lot of things happening, to say the least. There is a lot of need. There's a lot of things we have to be and to do. And the role of religion has been to give us strength and to give us guidance to do what needs to be done in the world around us. And in order to do that, we have to believe that the mysteries are there. There is something greater than the world around us. There just has to be. And there has to be a reason why we do what we do and who we are, something that binds us together. And our people have had that mystery for thousands of years. We schlepped it with us in the desert, then we parked it in Jerusalem, and we've kept it going. But the Torah plays a little trick on us, because where does God speak from? This is advanced here. Where does God speak from on top of that Ark of the Covenant with the little angels or oxen or birds or whatever they are facing each other? God doesn't speak from the statues. That's other religions. God speaks from the empty space in between them. Because the Torah was trying to tell us even then that the mystery of the universe, this thing, this connection, this God, it isn't in anything physical. It is in the very air around us. It is in the world. And our job is to try. It's so hard in the world that we live in, full of rational stuff, full of nihilism, full of problems. It is so hard, but we have to try to live a little bit like those ancient Israelites who could walk out their front door and be reminded that mysteries and miracles are real and that we are connected to something bigger than ourselves. That is our job in 2026. Because that's the thing that's going to keep us from shouting at people in traffic. That's the thing that's going to make us better people. If we could live with some of that wonder, some of that mysticism, that there is power in the world that we don't know about, that we could tap into, and it asks us to do something, to be better people, to treat people like they are also tapped into that glory and power and image of God. That is really hard, but it's what we all have to do. So we have been carrying that idea with us for a long time. We gave up the need for the metal statues in the tents, but we still have it inside of us. Our job today is to find it in the empty space around us, to find it in the empty space above us, to find it in the people around us. But we have to remember that the Ark of the Covenant still exists, that the miracles that it symbolizes are there if we can find them and appreciate them and see them, and that the connection that edut, that witnessing, that covenant demands of us, connection to the people around us, connection to making the world a healthier place, a happier place, and a holier place, is very, very real. And it's here for all of us if we can find a way to see it. Shabbat Shalom.